Let's get started. This is the LOC's legislative update for Friday, June 6th. I'm Kevin Toon. I'm the communications director for the LOC, sitting in for Patty Mulvihill, she's traveling today on league business. Want to welcome everybody to today's webinar as we are now officially in the home stretch of the 2025 legislative session with 23 days remaining before the scheduled sine die on June 29th. Before we start, some quick housekeeping issues. If you have not yet done so, please make sure your microphone is muted. Second, we will end this webinar promptly at 1 o'clock. Also, please update your screen name to tell everybody the city that you represent. There are instructions for how to do that in the chat. I put those in there earlier. Our focus this week will be a little bit different from our usual format, which is appropriate since we're in the final weeks of the session. We have a lot of new information for you today. We'll do our best to move through it quickly so we can take questions at the end of our presentations from our lobbyists. Here's a quick overview of the bills we're going to be covering. We're focused almost exclusively on our top legislative bills of this week. And we'll start that with two bills related to budget investments in housing and homelessness. We'll then move to the legislation on the property tax work group as well. And from there, a bill related to lodging tax flexibility. Third, we'll get the long-awaited actual concrete information on the transportation package. I'm not making this up. We've had several weeks of suggesting that we had it for you, but we actually do have some new information to report on you, as you might guess by that sly grin you're seeing on Jim McCauley's face on screen. We'll move from there to the water portfolio, three bills related to water policy. And finally, we'll wrap it up with Senate Bill 916, unemployment insurance for striking workers. Now, because of the volume of information that we need to present, we're going to hold questions till the end of the presentations. If you have a question, please raise your Zoom hand or type your question in the chat feature. I and other staff will do our best to make sure we note who raised their hands or posed a question in the chat first. Let's begin, and we're going to turn it over now to Jim McCauley, who will take us through the top bills of the week. Jim?
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, lots of stuff happening this week. As Kevin mentioned, we are in those closing few weeks of session with a lot of things happening. I'll be able to get into a little bit of detail in the transportation package here a little bit later on. We now have a physical framework, so that's a good place to be at. For the rest of the lobby work that we've got, we've still got a number of our legislative priorities that are still in play. We've had a little bit of a door close on one of them that we'll get to, but there's still some opportunities to be able to modify it and get it back closer to something that might be, I'll just say, at least livable at this point in time. But we're all focused in on trying to close out those legislative priorities, and I think I'm going to start with what we've got on as far as top bills of the week, and I'm going to move to Alexandra Ring, who covers our housing and homelessness and land use policy work. Alexandra, you've got House Bill 5011 and House Bill 3644. These are essentially the budget investments for both housing and homelessness. So I'll let you kick it away.
Yeah, thanks, folks. So actually very exciting news this morning. Things started getting scheduled, or not scheduled, assigned to the TED subcommittee. So that's Transportation and Economic Development. That's the subcommittee of Ways and Means where all housing budget investments are heard. HB 3644 was referred. We don't yet have it scheduled for a hearing, so we're keeping an eye out. But really, this 3644 is both the programmatic framework for shelter funding. I think in the last couple of years, we've seen really large scale investments in shelter, but we haven't seen really a programmatic framework that allows kind of a consistent investment across the board. This really represents that for the first time. There's a proposed investment attached to it of $217 million. I would really encourage all of you to reach out to your legislators and emphasize the necessity of that program being fully funded. $217 million is a huge number, fully understand that. But that is just the number to keep shelter beds open. That is not an expansion of shelter services. That is not, meeting the actual need that we have in the state of Oregon, which is much larger than the available shelter beds that we have. That really is just sticking to what is currently funded. Underfunding it would result in kind of a new wave of homelessness and some increased challenges for our local jurisdictions. So that will be up soon. I sent out contact information in the bulletin article earlier this week about how to contact your legislators. On HB 5011, this is the full-scale budget for OHCS, which is Oregon Housing and Community Services. This is where the majority of investments in things like homelessness prevention and housing development live. We expect to see that scheduled in the coming, week. I would say if it's not scheduled by end of day today, I will be very surprised. But really continuing to push to ensure that, we have full-scale funding for housing and homelessness. So reach out to your legislators, let them know how important these investments are to your city.
All right. Thank you very much for that. So messaging for folks, can you break it down into what they need to do, kind of the timeline that we need to get some advocacy going back in here so we can try to at least capture something close to 217 million for the shelter?
We can dream. I would say really the messaging needs to be, and I will put it in the chat as well because I have it on hand here somewhere. Really just that cities cannot do this alone. I think there's been kind of a pervasive narrative among members of Ways and Means that cities and counties really should be the ones doing this work and that it's their investment to make. Whereas I think kind of the reality on the ground is that there's not the funding at the city level available or the county level available to get this done all on our own. And that, we all, the creation of this problem was as a state, and so we need continued state investments to deal with it.
Okay, fabulous. Thanks for that. And there's been kind of a difficulty trying to convince the Ways and Means chairs that the state, still needs to have a role in shelter funding. I mean, that's ultimately what this comes down to. Okay, great. Thanks very much for that. Let me move on to Jenna Jones. She does our tax and finance as well as economic development work on behalf of the league. There's a couple of bills up, very important to us. Certainly the local lodging tax flexibility, that's House Bill 3962, and then House Bill 2321, which is, I think, some good news on property tax reform potentially. Yeah. So Jenna, kick it off.
Thanks, Jim. So starting with TLT House Bill 3962, it's been a busy week on TLT. There were lots of amendments. We have hit double digits on amendments. There was an informational hearing this week. There was a work session this week. And so there's a lot of movement on TLT and a willingness to get TLT flexibility done. One thing that's kind of shifted from where we were last week to now is we do have those amendments after negotiating with Orla, and another amendment that has come up since the informational hearing. So the first was the -8 and the -10 amendments, which are very similar to what we had proposed in the -2 amendment, which was adding tourism impacted services as a definition to restricted post 2003 funds. To cover public safety and community infrastructure. Community infrastructure is water, wastewater, transportation, and recreation infrastructure. So parks, trails, public restrooms, trailheads, beach access points, all of those things were kind of covered in additional to critical infrastructure. The -8 amendment is mostly the -2, but it goes to public safety and critical infrastructure. And then it also creates a 10-year sunset for the flexibility and then has a reporting requirement for local jurisdictions and DMOs who receive transient lodging tax funds. Good news, the reporting can be done by LOC on behalf of cities, and we would likely do that through our survey process. We do a TLT survey every 3 years. We would just change it to every 2 years. The -10 amendment same as the Dash 8, but leaves in community infrastructure and public safety, keeps the sunset, also has a reporting requirement. During the informational hearing this week, the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association's lobbyists said definitions are not the way to go. They leave way more uncertainty for our members. If you're going to do anything, you should just do a change in the percentage that goes to tourism and the percentage that goes to unrestricted. So Representative Pam Marsh dropped an amendment, the Dash 11 amendment, that completely switched the 70-30 split. So 70% would be discretionary for cities and 30% would be reserved for tourism promotion and tourism related facilities. So that's where we're at right now. Because those last minute amendments came up, the committee decided not to work the bill yesterday, but they will likely work it next week. In my conversations with some of the committee members and our sponsors, we are working on an amendment that would go with the Dash 11 with a couple of changes. So right now, the most likely amendment will be whether or not to change the split completely to be more in local government's favor. So I don't know if we'll land there at 70-30 the opposite way. It could go to 60-40, it could go 50-50. But 50-50 is our floor as LOC before the juice is not worth the squeeze. So I'll keep you guys updated, and hopefully next week the bill is going to the floor. I will say, if you can talk up transient lodging tax to the revenue committee members and your representatives in the House, right now it is crucial. And if you have any feedback on the different amendments, I will put my email in the chat and you can feel free to give me your feedback. Always trying to listen to what our cities want and need and what is most pertinent on the ground. So shifting topics to the other bill listed for today's agenda, House Bill 2321. I will say this is with the Dash 2 amendment. I don't know if it's posted, if it's been engrossed into the bill yet, but I think you've heard me say a lot of times throughout this session that the House Revenue Committee and a couple of different legislators like Representative Paul Evans have been introducing bills around property tax reform task forces. We finally have landed a plane on one of them. House Bill 2321 is going to require the Legislative Revenue Office in coordination with AOC, LOC, and other local government organizations to come up with changes for the property tax system and report those to the legislature ahead of the 2027 session. Rep. Nathanson said on the record that she plans to have a property tax work group that will be held in conjunction with that study that LRO is doing and working with local governments. So it will likely get a lot bigger than what the bill says. Part of that was political for not having a fiscal impact on the bill. So Representative Nathanson has been a great partner this session on property tax reform, and she has made her legislative intent clear that she wants to get, public interest groups, businesses, cities, counties, special districts, school districts, all in the same place in the state to talk about how we do better for property taxes. So this is exciting momentum that we haven't seen in a long time. And that's all I've got.
Definitely. Wow, a major progress on two pieces of legislation that we have been working on for probably 2 decades or longer, with some kind of movement forward for both of those. So maybe the first one up is to hit a little bit more on this lodging tax proposal. It looks like many of those alternative amendments put us in a good place. Best thing for folks to do to reach out, obviously, is to push their members to support one particular amendment that we're focused on, or offer support for a couple of them.
Yeah, Jim, I think the Dash 8, the Dash 10, and the Dash 11 are all great amendments that we could live with. I will say there is likely a Dash 12 or 13 coming that will be a consensus amendment between the sponsors. So right now, I would keep it conceptual that the amendments are good for cities, and add whatever you would like around if you prefer a percentage change or a definitional shift. Please let me know any feedback that you get from your legislator, and I will send out an action alert when we have the amendment we know is going to be the one that we intend to push forward during the work session. So I don't think that amendment is ready yet. I'm hoping by Monday that I will have something to send out, and it will be a action alert to every city that has a transient lodging tax and probably our full membership.
Okay, fabulous. That's great. And on the property tax work group, that too is in a good place, being able to move forward. So probably just some simple attaboys or attagirls or whatever on this thing, and just say, look, good framework. Let's move forward with this work group so we can move to the next level and identify some reforms.
Yep, I would say it's going to go to the House floor. It passed unanimously out of committee, both Republicans and Democrats that supported it. So just a quick, hey, representative, can you support House Bill 2321 when it's up on the floor would be great. And then hopefully it moves just as seamlessly through the Senate.
Okay. Again, I don't think I can emphasize enough the significance of where we're at this point. We've never been there. We've never been this far on either one of these issues. And you're going to get several member alerts next week on some of our top priorities moving through them. So the more you respond to that, the more you have outreach with your legislators is going to put your lobby team in a much better position to be able to get these things across the finish line. So next one up is transportation. So it feels like there needs to be a drum roll here, but I'll make this pretty simple. We now have details of a framework. I don't physically have bill language, but the framework will mirror what will be in legislation. And that legislation is going to be expected on Monday morning. There's a number of, I'll just say, process steps that you have to move through within the legislature, even with a 24-hour notice. So top line for us right now, and it's in the bulletin, is that many of those elements that have been part of our transportation advocacy are still in this transportation package. It's still built for a back to the basics focus. 50-30-20 is still the principal formula distribution for local governments. That is incredibly important for us to continue to maintain that formula long term. I think, as everybody knows, when you look at the transportation system for both cities and counties, it's twofold or more, threefold increase over what the state manages. And we need to make sure that we continue to receive that 50% share going down the road. I don't have a physical top end number and to be able to compare that to what we had in March. My sense is, as I'm kind of scrambling through some of these revenue increases that will be part of that state highway fund distribution, it's probably a 20% trim off of that original, but it also has a more accelerated timeline. It's not going to be a 6-year rollout for that state highway fund component. It's going to be really over the next couple of years. And the gas tax itself, as an example, is not going to be a 20 cent increase over 6 years. It's going to be a 15-cent increase over the next 3. Transportation safety, again, still remains a top concern. They want to reduce those traffic fatalities, and we're very much part of that overall public safety component. There will be additional transit funding, effectively an increase over what was proposed in March, to basically bring another, I'll say, roughly $280 million into transit funding over the next couple of years as they look at payroll increases. They're going to still have a commitment to finish some of those top end House Bill 2017 projects that haven't been built yet. There's no detail yet on what that timeline looks like, but there's still a commitment to those projects. We also are looking at shifting away from fuel tax. And the first ones going into that mix will be a road user fee structure or a road user charge. It's going to be a per mile equivalent of what the gas tax increase. So this is not going to be in addition, but the first vehicle owners that are going to be in that mix will be electric vehicle owners, existing ones, and then they'll be weaving in future EV owners, as well as those hybrids. And then eventually over time, I'll need to take a look and see what the language is, but I still have a sense that this is going to be moved into other internal combustion engine, vehicles. There'll be an option if you don't want to have a tracking structure for what you drive physically in Oregon. It'll be an annual fee over time. There's also going to be a commitment here to simplify weight mile tax. Truckers are going to be very interested in this side of things. And then the final piece here that is still very much part of this transportation package is going to be the Department of Transportation's accountability. There are several measures that they're going to have on both accountability, their management decisions, and then overall oversight by the legislative body. So going forward, as I mentioned at the top end, this very much mirrors exactly what our Transportation Policy Committee recommended, to be part of a robust multimodal package, and very much suggest supporting this as individual cities because of the additional revenue it brings into the system, but also the other investments that are out there that we'll be able to take advantage of. We'll see details of this in legislation and actual language, bill language on Monday. Expect some kind of a member alert from me as well on Monday afternoon to every city in the state. The hearings. So hearings are expected to be on potentially Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week. I'll need to update the bulletin article a little bit on that. We expected to have evening meetings. I don't have the details yet, but they're trying to move those to the afternoons. The focus of which potentially will change as well. And again, I'll get that updated in the bulletin article, and that'll be fresh on Monday also with a member alert. So we're going to want to make sure that cities are testifying during those opportunities. Pretty much everybody who signs up is going to get 2 minutes of fame to make your pitch. Next week is really our opportunity to get this bill across the finish line outside of additional advocacy. We need to make sure we have a really good showing in front of the committee. And I will get, again, some message points to focus on, and a little bit better sense on what next week's schedule is going to look like. But what's in the bulletin article right now provides you with the most recent information I've got. It's still a solid framework. The House bill itself is going to be House Bill 2025. So they're going to continue to mirror the same format they had back in 2017. And this has been a pretty long journey, very different lobbying effort, very different, I'll say, structure that they've put together in this package moving forward, just in terms of how it's been communicated. The internal conversations that are going on are very different than what we had during the 2017 process. But at least at this stage, as I said, framework is a great mirror for the work that we've done and the recommendations that we've had as an organization, coming from our Transportation Policy Committee and overall advocacy on transportation package. So happy to take any questions again at the end here. And that's an update. Much better place for us to be. I'm going to shift here to Michael Martin. Michael's got, again, some bills that are moving forward. These are, I think, for the most part, all good news stories. A lot of work has gone into each of these bills, ranging from the water right transfer bill, Senate Bill 1153, to water reuse, which is House Bill 2169, and the PFAS biosolids study, House Bill 2974. So, Michael, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I want to give a quick update on the three bills that Jim mentioned. I will start with the water right transfer bill, and really just want to say at the top, thanks to everyone who has been involved with this process. It has taken a team effort because originally Senate Bill 1153, dealing with water right transfers, would have effectively put new conditions on that administrative process in a way that would expose the league and our members to significant litigation and cost without really acknowledging the work that our members do already when going through very complex water right transfer process and all the mitigation that we do. So effectively, what has happened is we have a municipal carve out in the Dash 10 amendment. It was originally scheduled for yesterday to be voted out of the Senate Rules Committee, but is rescheduled, and this is a good thing, rescheduled for Monday out of the Rules Committee so we can, review it, make sure it has everything that our folks who've been at the negotiating table negotiating this very complex bill. So, end of the day, there's a municipal carve out in this bill. That's the bill that we would like to see part of it as passed, and it has moved us from an opposing position early on to a neutral position. So, and again, this has been a tremendous team effort. So, everybody, I can't mention everybody by name, but I just really appreciate all the work that has gone into this from city lobby and folks around the table. So, next, I'll give you an update on some bills actually that were just passed out of the Joint Ways and Means Committee. Bill that's been around for a couple of years is a water reuse bill. This really sort of codifies that the agencies should be doing work on around water reuse. And it creates a new staff position, natural resource specialist position, to lead efforts and collaborate on this. This was a bill that the League, special districts, and Association of Clean Water Agencies had supported, and it just kind of as part of the process just moved really rapidly out of the Natural Resources Subcommittee and then the Ways and Means earlier this morning. The second bill, I want to give you an update, also passed out of Joint Ways and Means this morning, is a PFAS biosolids study bill. As many of you know, a lot of the biosolids that produced out of the wastewater systems, they're land applied. There was a lot of background work on this bill. Aqua is a big part of that. And really to take a really strong look at Oregon, because PFAS is in the news a lot lately, but there was really nothing that's Oregon focused because every state has their own challenges with PFAS. And part of the rationale for having this study is that it would really take a look specifically at Oregon. So that's a quick update on those bills of the week from a water perspective. And again, just thank everybody for being part of that water transfer discussion.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. One thing I definitely want to emphasize here is, again, part of what we end up doing as your lobby team is being part of coalitions, whether we're the lead in it or whether we're just one of those other organizations kind of at the head of the spear, we'll say. And each one of these bills took a sizable partnership to have success. Folks basically pushing into legislators at various times or as teams, and is a great measure of one of the successful things that we're able to do as an organization, working with a lot of our different partners that are around the table. So, as Michael said on the front end of this, much appreciation for all those cities that were really active in this. All that technical background and all that technical detail and stuff that help out with each one of these water bills has been incredibly helpful in the process. So going forward, Michael, with members in terms of reaching out, it effectively really becomes reaching out to the legislators, letting them know how important, again, 1153 is. Need to have their support around that. Need to make sure they understand the significance to their own community with water supply. Same kind of true with both water reuse as well as PFAS.
At this point, I think the fact that they're sailing through the process, like the PFAS and reuse, I think it's good. Yeah.
Okay. Fabulous.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, of course. Let's finish out with Scott Winkles. He's been our general government lead for years, decades, perhaps. I'm going to let him update folks on Senate Bill 916. This is the unemployment insurance for striking workers. Not a great news of the week, but Scott can at least give us a heads up on what's next.
Good morning, and as Jim indicated, it's just shy of 2 decades in this role, so my 19th year is coming up. So Senate Bill 916, this is the bill that would require cities to subsidize striking workers by paying them unemployment insurance. So cities, like other public employers, reimburse the unemployment insurance fund instead of paying the tax. So in the event the bill would allow those workers to receive those unemployment benefits, the city would then get a bill from the employment department to pay dollar for dollar for those benefits. You would also be looking at the cost of hiring replacement workers. So it's a very costly bill for cities, and I think even more importantly, it would likely lead to the disruption of critical public services. Disappointing news on the House this week, but we're not done. The bill came out on an almost party line vote. Representative Lively from Springfield did break with his party and vote no on the bill. We had some other no votes lined up, but those crumbled on the floor. The bill was amended in the House, and it now goes back to the Senate for concurrence. We are working on a plan to obtain enough no votes to deny concurrence, get that to a conference committee so it can be amended with a compromise amendment. The compromise amendment would be similar to what was passed in Washington State, which would, for most workers, it would be a 3-week wait before they could apply for unemployment benefits if they were not working due to a lawful strike, and cap those benefits at 6 weeks. There's also some provisions in there for the UI tax paying employers to ensure that the cost to the bill would not be socialized. So small employers who don't have unionized workforces would not be at risk of their workers going on strike and having those workers get social UI benefits. They would not be paying that cost. And so those are the provisions that we are seeking in a compromise amendment. It's not ideal, but it is certainly better than the base bill at this time. We're not going to do an alert, but I would ask, I will be reaching out and have been reaching out to individual cities on targeted legislators to help us execute on this plan. So I don't make predictions, but I don't think we're completely sunk yet. So I do think we do have an opportunity to get this bill amended in a conference committee. So that is the update. It is not ideal. I want to thank everybody who engaged with their legislators on this bill. It's been tough. It continues to be difficult. I think I've heard several legislators lament that this bill has sucked so much oxygen out of the session for other conversations that there's some frustration. So I hope it's a learning experience for some folks, but this is where we are. So happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. As Scott said, this has been a kind of a session-long effort. A lot of different folks around the table, and we still have another shot. We still have another shot to try to trim back the overall impact of this thing. So keep up the advocacy, stay on top of everything that we're pushing out here over the final 3 weeks of the session. So that pretty much concludes your primary updates, bills of the week, and overall legislative update for folks. But definitely want to take questions and provide you the opportunity to get a little bit more detail from your lobby team here on what remains of this session. So with that, feel free to start raising your hands or start dropping some questions into the chat, and we'll do our best to get everything answered here before we finish up for the day. So Kevin, would you like to take back the reins here?
You bet. So yes, just to reiterate protocol, raise your Zoom hand, or just simply type your question in the chat, and we'll be monitoring who submitted questions in what order and going to those individuals in that order. Just remember that this is an opportunity to ask questions and receive answers from our lobbyists. While your feedback is important on the activities of the of our advocacy efforts. Because of time constraints, we want to limit it to just Q&A. If you have comments, which I've seen a couple of times, chat is always a good way to share those with the group at large.
Hey, Kevin, there was one that actually, I'm just kind of going through the chat
Okay.
list, and there was a question here from Jennifer Jolly about cap and trade,
Right.
part of the transportation framework. And I did send a note out saying it was not, but I just wanted to make sure I address it verbally. Yeah. So the cap and trade element that was discussed last week on our call as a possible revenue source is no longer in this framework document at this point in time. I don't know if it's going to creep its way back in before the end of the session, but pretty limited opportunity to try to introduce a brand new revenue structure without full vetting and an awful lot more communication than what's taken place in the last week. So yeah, that's definitely out.
Jim, for clarification purposes, since we have so many cities on this call, and you mentioned it in your bulletin article that you'll be doing a legislative alert on Monday in advance of the 3 days, I guess, worth of hearings.
Yeah.
The Transportation Committee is going to convene, and your alert is going to have talking points in it, correct?
Yeah, we'll have talking points. I'll have a confirmed schedule on each day's time and location. Again, you can do this virtually. Those of you able to show up in person will be terrific. The way they're going to have this structured is with each of those hearing dates, they're going to have a kind of a different focus. So they're going to have a day where they're going to focus really on transit funding and rail, as an example. They're going to have another day where they're going to focus on really the larger anchor type projects. And then they're going to have another day that is more of kind of on the operations and maintenance. And that's really kind of the day for local governments. We've been promised a panel, and I'm doing some outreach right now. I can't have 15 people on it, so I'll do my best to try to get a large city, kind of a medium-sized city, and then a small city included on that panel. But the rest of that time, there's no reason why you can't, as a community, continue to sign up and voice your support for transit funding, as an example. But our focus day is likely going to be on Thursday. And again, you'll find out more on the detail and stuff on Monday.
And we're looking ballpark, maybe having you send that out Monday morning.
Oh, I'm going to spend the weekend
Are you
trying
just
to get the
comfortable with
analytics
Monday?
and make sure I got the numbers straight on this stuff, because I don't
Got it.
like having to correct myself. It gets complicated enough because the funding's not just coming from one source here. The other part of this is I need to also confirm what this looks like in the actual piece of legislation. So
Yeah.
what we anticipate happening is Monday morning, this bill is going to be in front of the committee as an introduction. At that point, we'll know what it looks like, and then it effectively will get first read by the end of the day, and then that basically triggers that 24-hour clock into a hearing on Tuesday, which will likely be more of an informational, and then Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday afternoons will be focused in on the details of the package. And then effectively from that point on, committee is going to move that bill. Following week, it's going to enter into the queue for floor votes.
And Jim, this will come directly from you?
Yep.
Okay, so that's a good reminder for folks to look. That won't be under the mothership LOC header. It'll be directly from Jim with this important information. And I think I also heard Jenna mention that she probably will have an alert sometime next week. So please look for those as well. I'm not seeing questions, and I'm not seeing Zoom hands being raised, so we are going to call it a week. We appreciate everybody's time today. A couple of quick reminders. We'll be back here again next Friday. And for the remaining Fridays in the month of June, as we approach the June 29th sine die. Also, if you haven't already, check out today's edition of the LOC Bulletin, our weekly newsletter. It arrived in your inboxes this morning at approximately 11 a.m. And we've got articles in there about all the bills, most of the bills we've discussed today, Also, some information about how to get a scholarship for the 100th LLC conference and some upcoming training, including 3 free trainings next week on the changes that are happening with PERS. So with that, we will wish you all a wonderful, happy weekend. Enjoy the sunshine. Thank you for everything you do for your communities, and we'll see you back here next Friday.
Jim, do you have your hand up?